Hello, this is Marlon Barrios Solano. Here we are with Jill Johnson in this incredible, beautiful space of Cedar Lake Company. And we are going to talk about her new project.
It's my first installation for Cedar Lake, and it's called The Copier. And it actually the inspiration came from the sound of a computer printer. And the composer, David Poe, made this kind of interesting quasi-waltz, and it got me to thinking, and then we got into a discussion about, how do we copy each other in daily life? And, we're forwarding emails and we copy each other when we line up at airports and in social situations, and we even mimic our own daily rituals and how you get up in the morning. And so I was kind of fascinated about how that would not necessarily translate into, that exact story, but how we could behaviorally format and choreograph with the idea of copying, or imitating each other, qualities, or the actual, someone would come in, put their hand out, the next person would come in, and they sort of layer that. And with this idea of the working day too. The sort of social things that we've been developing, stuff like that. So.
Yes, I think that is very, very interesting, and also how that is juxtaposed with this notion of the work as an installation. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because you can make a piece like that for the traditional proscenium stage.
And it's an interesting thing. I think it's the informality of an installation, in that because the audience can individualize how they see the performance. It doesn't have to have that same kind of proscenium-based sort of very distinct sections. That's right, frontal, and it's usually to the audience, although not necessarily. So I think in the way that it's different is that the timings of it are more life-like. I have a lot of experience doing improvisation and performances because I danced with William Forsythe's company. Well, now it's called the Forsythe Company. Previously it was Frankfurt Ballet for 10 years. And I've actually been working with him for almost...
But what he called improvisational technologies.
Technologies, that's right. Very specific, in other words, just task-oriented. And eventually, it keeps evolving, but state-bound things. What is it like to be inside? How do you do the same step in a million different ways in terms of how you're thinking about how you approach it? Is it the softest approach? Is it harder? That sort of thinking about tasks and very specific directions that aren't limitations, in the same way that jazz musicians use a very set phrase, that they have that specific phrase. They can actually have more freedom, because if something exists, then you can go in and out and return and reference it, rather than having so many choices. And I think it's the same for dance, that if it becomes too vague, then what is it really?
I was wondering today, what would happen? What is the difference between doing something that you will do this site-specific or here? Because I felt like, well, if you are calling an installation something that is exploration of this, that you are giving the audience or whoever comes the idea of walking around and just the freedom of having their own perspective. What would happen if you do this in the corner of 23rd and 8th?
It would be interesting. I think it would be cool to explore. Thanks. different people can pass by the same thing and have their very own experience with it. It could be the light at that time of day. It could be the mood that they're in. You know, the same shopkeeper's there, but he's not in the same place, so when you pass by you might see him, or if a different time you wouldn't. So I think in a similar way to being on the street is that it's the same setup, but because there's an improvisational component to it, each performance is different, and each person will see the performance differently.
How has been working with the company?
They're so fantastic. They're really, I appreciate so much what Benoit, the director, is doing, in that it's the true tradition of a dance company, that the pieces that they dance helps them to progress as dancers. So they have real artistic process, and there's an investment in terms of time, which is invaluable. It's not throwing something together for the performance, but the process to get to the performance is equally as valuable as the performing itself. I think they've had this collective experience of growing together, which is a very strong bond. And just, it's the structure of the company. Even, you know, everyone that works here, I find, is very, they work together toward the same goal, which is creating great art. And I think that it really reflects in everything you experience with the company, but it really affects the dancers too. Technology is amazing. I mean, we connect with people that we never would have been close to, or you feel closer to people that you're away from because you get to see them that day in live time, rather than even a video. It's different if it's live. So I think technology is great, but not at the expense of human connection. What I'm interested in is exploring ideas about approach. Like, for example, I take inspiration from this book that I'm reading at the moment about wabi-sabi. Do you know this? It's kind of a movement or an approach that comes from Japan from a long time ago. But it's sort of the beauty in imperfection and getting rid of everything that's unnecessary and sort of stripping things down. I mean, we think we need so much stuff. And yet, you know, I mean, Crackberry. I mean, it's a thing that people are attached to that we didn't need how many years ago, you know, but you feel compelled, you get that email and you have to respond. And, you know, I'm interested in what happens when you don't do that. What space do you create to do that? So the idea of that, also what happens when you apply that to improvisation.
You get attached to a movement.
You get attached to, or an expectation. You think, you know, if I give a direction to one of the dancers and they're worried about what I'll think, then they're not in that moment making the decision about what they're doing. I love to be able to keep dancers delighted, to keep them inspired. So it's not that I sort of expect them to think like I do, but to inspire them to think and really take the responsibility to do that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you so much.
Very nice. Thank you.